Thanks to the developer for the review copy. If you enjoy the channel, consider sticking around. Remember, we give away a free Nintendo Switch game each and every month. Actually, we do a lot more than that, but there you go. Some games live or die on their ability to articulate and visualize emotions that we all take for granted, to make visual the intangible thoughts that undoubtedly creep up on us in our darkest hours as well as throughout the course of our lives. Sea of Solitude is such a game, and blends the line between computer game and work of art. But was it necessary to bring it across to the Nintendo Switch, or is this one all washed up? Let's find out. As far as story goes, you take on the role of Kay, who is struggling with the inner turmoils relating to events of her past, with key figures in her life manifesting themselves as these dark Shadow of Colossus style beasts. And it's these monsters who Kay has to come to terms with throughout the 3 to 4 hour long game, each of them representing a close acquaintance. And without spoiling anything, some of these interpersonal tales are incredibly harrowing and very well depicted to the player. Kay herself is voice acted along with all other cast members, without whom the experience wouldn't even come close to what you're left with.
No, we can figure this out. I can...
As far as storyline goes and delivery, it's the heart and soul of the experience and the main reason you'd come to the game. If you're a fan of slow-paced walk-in simulators like Journey or Abzu, then you kind of know what to expect. However, gameplay attempts to go a little deeper than some of these, but manages to stumble along the way. As far as gameplay and controls then, you start your journey aboard a rickety boat, following a mysterious glowing figure. You can fire off your flare gun to direct you at any time, and this becomes the crutch of the game, allowing you to quickly find the next switch. And I say switch because that's essentially what the game consists of, whether it be removing the purge by holding a trigger or adjusting a beam of light to clear the path. While I understand their inclusion as a narrative device, once you've repeated the same action 5 or 10 times, it runs the risk of diminishing your enjoyment of what is an otherwise excellent story.
It's not my fault!
Sailing the boat is nice, and oftentimes there's quite a bit of platforming involved, where you'll have to dive beneath the waves to try and dodge a sea monster, reaching shore before you become its appetizer. The platforming elements of the game were probably where I had the most fun, with some stages being very cleverly and intricately designed. Others have you sneaking around quite grotesque monsters, and these, despite not being hugely threatening in terms of allowing you to respawn almost instantly, were decidedly unnerving. There are a few boss style segments as well that take the mechanics used over the previous 25 minutes and shrink them down into generally a smaller arena, such as collecting more glowing things or sending helpers up to trigger yet more switches and then removing once again the darkness. It's a shame, in my opinion, that the developer didn't do more in terms of gameplay mechanics, as they've got everything here when it comes to visuals and level design. The world itself, based loosely on Berlin, looks wonderful and has a lot of verticality. The waves and waters are perilous, and riding around in your boat as the huge beast lurks beneath the waves is incredibly cinematic. I mentioned the Shadow of Colossus at the start of this review, and the monster designs are very similar in the best possible way. And as far as visual storytelling goes, in its best moments, Sea of Sorrows is almost second to none. You can leave your boat, but there's a light and dark mechanic at play here as well, where much of your time you'll be bringing light back to the world, and there are a number of hidden collectible items to find which grant you a little extra story exposition, which is a nice touch and a reason to go back if you really enjoyed the story. The controls suffer from a few clunkier moments and slightly unusual missions, like times where it will lock you into a walk for narrative purposes, but it just feels a little forced. The same goes for a creep or making you run around. It would have been much more efficient and effective to have the player controlling these things. Your experience of the game will be heavily determined by your affinity with the story. Personally, there were moments in here which almost brought a tear to my eye, and others that had those same eyes rolling, where the game almost goes too far into the melodramatic. That being said, there are some incredible narrative highs, and a voice-acted exposition can be brilliant. I didn't feel like the game was fully resolved by its conclusion, not necessarily in terms of narrative, but more in delivery, as it sped up with those chapters getting shorter and shorter, and then before you knew it, it was the end of the game and the credits were not necessarily rolling, but I don't want to spoil everything. I'd say it's certainly worth experiencing. Just know what you're getting into. The gameplay for me scores 15 out of 20, and that's predominantly based on the story, which is really good. The controls are okay, although there was too much repetition in terms of systems used. However, I must give credit to the excellent use of HD Rumble. It's certainly one of the best implementations I've seen on the Nintendo Switch. Overall, I give controls 15 out of 20. Visually, the game is a stunner for the most part, with fantastic lighting effects, and hats off to the developers for including custom anti-aliasing sharpening. Everything runs for the most part at 30 FPS, but undoubtedly in handheld mode and at certain times in docked, you'll see a drop below 30. As you can see from the footage, it's generally a pleasant experience, but it's worth noting. There are a number of weather effects as well as a photo mode so that you can switch on the fly to take pretty pictures, but the pastel colours of the world and the overall architectural design make the game stand out. When you combine this with a stark contrast between the light and dark segments and the different weather effects, it really does pop. The undulating waves as your boat sputters across them make the world feel truly alive. Then there are the epic moments, such as when the waters are parted, allowing you a brief moment's respite to walk upon dry land. Sure, performance isn't always on point, but it is a treat for the eyes. The same has to be said for the audio. Spatial sound effects, excellent voice acting, the aforementioned HD rumble that ties perfectly to things like strikes of lightning, and a musical score that could come straight out of a Hollywood movie really make this feel a cut above the rest in terms of the audio. I love the visuals, but the performance stutters will cause it a few points, as well as a touch of pop-in in some of the later areas, so I give visuals and performance 15 out of 20. But that amazing soundtrack and great voice acting gets 20 out of 20. In terms of value, Sea of Solitude is going to set you back £17.99 or your regional equivalent. Why is it the director's cut? Well, it features entirely new dialogue and voice actors, as well as a rewritten script, which the director hoped gives a more complete view of the original vision, loosely based as it was on key events from her own life. Value is a difficult one to judge. While I think the experience is worthwhile, I also think it's overpriced. A director's cut might have just included a little bit more gameplay. And yes, I know there's going to be someone in the comments who argues that you would pay this price to go to the cinema, but the cinema this is not. At 3 to 4 hours, for most people, it will be a wait for a sale. I give value 13 out of 20. Overall then, Sea of Solitude is held together by its storytelling, despite some less than perfect gameplay moments. The visuals are okay, but it's the audio that really shines, and that value, perhaps, wait for a sale. Overall it gets a SwitchUp score of 78%. Is this one you've been looking forward to? Do you like the look of the game? Are you a fan of those slower paced narrative games? Or do you always find yourself craving some more in-depth gameplay? Thanks as always for watching. A big thanks to our patrons who support us each and every month. We really do appreciate it. All the links to that will be down in the description. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. And yeah, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!